so glad you stopped by again. We have a bigger gap between reading sections this time, and since Achilles has rejected going back to war, sad face, the next several books will be full of bloody effort and series of train wrecks from which we cannot look away. Now, the Greeks must figure out what they're going to do to end the war since Achilles won't come back. And what they plan first is a night raid on the Trojan camp. Even so, the Trojans are doing their own thing to stifle the Greeks too, but only one plan will win in this book. After the events of the previous day, the Greek leaders meet to discuss the dire situation as their camp is on the verge of being overrun by the Trojans. They decide to send spies to gather intelligence on the Trojan army. Espionage. The Greek heroes Diomedes and Odysseus volunteer for a night raid into the Trojan camp. At the same time, the Trojan leaders send a spy of their own, Dolon, to scout the Greek camp. Diomedes and Odysseus intercept Dolon, who reveals valuable information about the Trojan positions, including the location of Rhesus, the king of Thrace, who has just arrived with his troops and horses to aid the Trojans. Diomedes and Odysseus sneak into the Trojan camp, kill Rhesus and several of his men, and on top of that, steal his horses. They return to the Greek camp with the horses, having successfully weakened the Trojan reinforcements. The Greeks set a surge of energy from themselves into this small victory. So they forge ahead with some serious momentum. Here comes Agamemnon again at the beginning of book 11, however. If you're like me, you're usually not so optimistic about what he will do for the Greeks, given his dishonorable picture at the beginning of the epic, especially the one that Homer paints for him. But in his heroism, let's see if it lasts. At the dawn of the next day, the battle resumes. Agamemnon leads a fierce assault against the Trojans, slaughtering many warriors. He is at the peak of his strength and achieves his moment of heroic glory, driving the Trojans back. Despite the Greeks' initial success, several of their leaders are injured. Agamemnon is wounded and forced to withdraw from the battle, followed by Diomedes and Odysseus, who are also injured by Trojan counterattacks. Big blow. With the Greek leaders incapacitated, Hector takes advantage of the situation and rallies the Trojans. He leads a fierce counterattack, pushing the Greeks back toward their own ships. Nestor persuades Patroclus, Achilles' closest friend, and who I will call his bestie in other videos, to convince Achilles to return to battle, or at least to lend his armor to Patroclus to inspire the Greek troops. Patroclus agrees to approach Achilles. And so we were right. Aggie's moment faded pretty quickly, and the Trojans keep this a bloody war. But the Greeks are in for it again in Book 12. The damage now includes fire. As the Greeks retreat behind the wall they built to protect their ships, the Trojans, led by Hector, mount an assault on the fortifications. The wall is strong, but the Trojans press forward with great determination. Zeus aids the Trojans in this effort by sending them favorable omens and strengthening their resolve, while the Greeks suffer from fear and uncertainty. Hector leads the Trojans in a decisive attack on the wall. Despite initial resistance from the Greek defenders, Hector smashes through the gates with a large stone, and the Trojans flood into the Greek camp, threatening the ships. The Greek forces are in disarray yet again as the Trojans, emboldened by Hector's success, begin setting fire to some of the ships. The Trojans are on a winning streak. In Homeric fashion, however, another ripple is coming, almost literally. Enter Poseidon. In the Iliad, waters will tend towards sympathy for the Greeks, especially in the earlier parts of the epic, because Thetis, Achilles' mother, is allied with the Greek effort. At least for a little while, the Greeks will have the upper hand. Seeing the Greeks in peril, Poseidon, the god of the sea, secretly intervenes on their behalf, despite Zeus's command that the gods remain neutral. Disguised as an old man, Poseidon rallies the Greek warriors and gives them renewed strength to resist the Trojans. Ajax the Greater and Ajax the Lesser become key figures in holding back the Trojan onslaught. With Poseidon's encouragement, they and the other Greek warriors managed to halt the Trojans' advance at the ships. The Cretan king, Idomeneus, plays a central role in the Greek counterattack, killing many Trojans in his own war-born spot. The Greeks momentarily regain control of the battlefield, pushing the Trojans back and preventing further destruction of the ships. Hector, though temporarily pushed back, refuses to give up, just as we know him to be. His leadership remains central to the Trojan resistance. Even when the war is tumultuous, we know for sure Hector remains steady. For those rooting for the Trojans so far in this story, we can only hope that his shining god of thunder were just as steady. Because in this book, book 14, we get to see Hera do what she does best: seek power over her hubby with sex appeal as her weapon of choice. Other weapons of war on the ground will weaken a character we love, too. Let's check it out. Nestor tends to the wounded Greek leaders, and the Greek forces are still in a critical situation. However, Poseidon continues to secretly aid the Greeks, boosting their morale. Hera, determined to help the Greeks, devises a plan to distract Zeus from the battle. She uses her beauty to seduce him, making him fall asleep. While Zeus is distracted, the other gods are free to intervene on behalf of the Greeks as they see fit. With Zeus temporarily out of the picture, Poseidon's involvement becomes more overt, and the Greeks are able to push the Trojans back. Ajax severely wounds Hector with a large stone, forcing Hector to retreat from the battlefield for a time. I suppose it was only a matter of time before Hector will be put out like Zeus. With Achilles out of the picture, we will see a direct correlation of the gods' power with their respective camps' headway. When one goes down, the other will eventually go down, vice versa. It seems, though, that the Greeks are too strong here, only in Book 14. So, Trojans, it's your turn. It's an epic kind of party when Zeus awakens because he's furious. Hera and the Greeks are in for it, to say the least. When Zeus awakens and realizes that Hera has deceived him, he's as mad as he could be. He orders Apollo to aid the Trojans and turn the tide of battle in their favor once more. With Apollo's help, Hector recovers from his wounds and returns to the battlefield, leading the Trojans in a renewed attack on the Greek ships. The Trojans, now with Apollo's support, push the Greeks back once again, nearing the Greek ships and threatening to set them fire. The Greeks are in desperate position, yet again, 3.0, as Hector advances absolutely relentlessly. Meanwhile, Patroclus prepares to plead with Achilles to either return to battle or allow him to fight in Achilles' place, setting the stage for pivotal events in the coming books. I mean, what's the harm in a little white lie? Intimidation could set the Trojans off their game, so how will the Trojans know the difference, especially from afar, if it's not Achilles in his own armor? What could possibly go wrong? Books 10 through 15 depict the ebb and flow of battle as both sides gain temporary advances with the aids of the gods, and it builds toward the inevitable confrontation involving Achilles and Patroclus. Thanks for listening. Book 16 will break up the back and forth nature of this war so far, but it's a heartbreaker. You've been warned, but nothing can prepare you for it, folks. Sorry. Bring your tissues, and my heart is with you.